Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lori Garducki. I direct the Criminal Justice Program at the MacArthur Foundation. We thank you for joining us for a series of very important conversations on a very timely topic in our society. At MacArthur, one of our big bets is the Safety and Justice Challenge, our initiative to change the way America thinks about and uses jails. There are nearly 11 million jail admissions annually. This is very much a local problem that requires local solutions, but it's national in scope. And I want to talk to Arthur about why conservatives should care about the justice system at the front door. MacArthur's been focusing on unnecessary, unwarranted use of incarceration, particularly how it impacts low-income and minority communities. What's the conservative right's take on these issues?
Yeah, I think that there are four pillars within the conservative movement that kind of defined why I believe we should be leading the way when it comes to jail reform and the front end of the criminal justice system at large. And the first one is, at the heart of conservatism is the idea that you are suspicious of the government. And very suspicious of the government. You know, I would privatize sidewalks if I could. And I believe that in my heart that you cannot be a limited government if you are a government that's acting arbitrarily and capricious against its people. And we know that happens in the criminal justice system. I think the second reason why I believe conservatives should be leading the way on this, and why my team leads, I think we lead the way on this, is because we're all about public safety. That's the mantra that we constantly sing is public safety. But what we're doing now doesn't actually make us safer. We know that if you put somebody who's low risk in jail for just a couple of days, their chances of committing new crimes go up. We actually make our communities more dangerous by detaining people who shouldn't be detained. I think the third reason is it's fiscally irresponsible. And for the money hawks out on my side of the spectrum, it's crazy to me that this is not something they champion. In Texas, they spend $1.5 million a day incarcerating people who are low risk. That is $62,000 an hour. So $103,000 by the time you all leave here today was spent in the state of Texas incarcerating people who are low risk. And we can debate what low risk means, but pretty much means that your chances of committing a new crime are low and your chances of coming back to court are very high. And I think the third, and for me probably the most important, is just the morality of it. We believe in a government that believes in judicial due process, and by detaining people who are innocent, who very often will plead guilty to avoid the horrors of war, I believe is something we should be in front of. And for the conservative right individuals out in the universe, I always say that Jesus had a really rough time in pretrial detention, and this really should be something that we're leading the way on. I mean, if this is who your role model is, why can't this be a way that we think about our citizens? And these are our citizens.
Well, I want to push you a little further on that, and that you raise some of the points at which the conservatives and more progressive folks can often agree
Sure.
with respect to an unfair and an unjust system. But I haven't heard as much from the right, if you pardon the expression,
Sure.
the conservative right, as opposed to other rights, about the legitimacy of the system, confidence in the system, and the disproportionate impact of the criminal justice system on people of color. How do you address the issues of the disparate impact on those individuals and those communities?
I think first and foremost is we call it what it is. We have some institutional racism in the system, and we need to address those things. I mean, modern conservatives come from the party of Lincoln, where we based our principles off of freedom and equity and justice. And now what I see very often is people on the right running because they believe that the criminal justice system is some kind of boogeyman that's going to murder their children. We have to lead the way on this because it's not only conservative ideals like I just reached out, but also because the math works out for us. We actually save money. We actually have safer streets. So why don't I believe there are more conservatives on the journey with me, I think they're afraid. I think fear drives a lot of what I mean. Donald Trump is president of the United States, and he's president of the United States because of fear. And I think that there's a lot of people on the right that wrongly echo that sentiment. And I write and I pray and I push to pull people to the right side of the right.
So
I just made that up.
Okay. So the racial and social and economic justice elements of this also resonate with the conservative right. You've taught me to distinguish among the different rights. So if there is this ideological spectrum that endorses criminal justice reform, what makes you hopeful about actually making progress?
Yeah. I think that because we're actually seeing reform take place in red states, not so much on the front end of the criminal justice system, but on the back end and actual incarceration rates and rates of punishment, much of that has been led in the red states. You saw Texas, Louisiana just passed a pretty comprehensive reform bills, and it's working. Texas lowered crime and built less prisons. Not a perfect reform system in Texas by any stretch of an imagination, but they had truly led the way when it comes to saving money and reducing crime. And they did it using conservative principles. And I think that a lot of conservatives mistake leniency with being soft on crime. No, it's about good policy. And good ideas are good ideas no matter where they come from, whether it comes from the right or the left. And the fact that you're seeing these implemented in the red states and they're working at the local level, at the state level, I don't know what's happening at the federal level, but it's having a direct impact. People are being freed. People are having jobs. And one point that I like to raise is, I remember a day where conservatives believed in family, and we shouted it from the rooftops. But when it comes to criminal justice system, we don't talk about those families. When you pull a father out of a home, it impacts his wife, his children, his employer, and the ripple effect is generational. And if we can get a hold of that and stop that, I believe that not only will we have better policy, but we'll actually grow the conservative movement. And I know some people are like, well, I don't want to do that. But hold on a second. But I mean, if you just look at the demographics of the United States, things are changing. If we, as an ideology, do not get ahead of this, we're not only doomed for extinction, but bad ideas are just going to percolate, and we're going to be less safe.
So tell me about some of those practical solutions. You know, MacArthur, the Safety and Justice Challenge, it's in 40 jurisdictions across the country in 25 states, and small jails like Campbell County, Tennessee, sure. Large jails like Los Angeles County. What are those practical innovations? Is it technology? Is it better decision makers like the prosecutors we just had out here? Bail reform? What's on your list?
All of the above, but I really like to focus on policing because that is when the rubber meets the road, and I'm a former police officer, and I have put handcuffs on people. And when the rubber meets the road, that is where citizens are injected with the criminal justice system. And so trying to change policing and the environment of policing in the United States, I think is really important. And we over-police communities of color. We over-prosecute communities of color. We disinherit a generation of people from the American dream and then act all surprised when they don't want to participate anymore. And if you really want to have an impact on the criminal justice system across the board, I think it really does have to start with expecting greatness from our cops, treating our cops with the respect they deserve, but understanding that risk assessments and all those things are great ideas, but we really need to ensure that our citizens are being policed in an excellent way.
So with over-criminalization, over-punishment, the front door, the back door, we're concerned about admissions, releases, the churn that occurs in jail. Other systems have to come into play if we're going to prevent that.
Absolutely. And I think when you push something on the criminal justice system, something else, explodes. And so we have to attack these issues not from the front end, not from the back end, but from all of the points of all the avenues. Because in the end, if we really want to have robust criminal justice reform, we need to have better cops, better prosecutors, and people should expect greatness from their elected and officials.
And I want to come home on that point in terms of the importance of engaging the community and the formerly incarcerated in thinking about those solutions. What's your take on that?
This has to be a bottom-up approach. Yes, you need good ideas at the top, and they need a trickle-down, but trickle-down criminal justice reform can only go so far. You need to have a community, a grassroots, if you will, movement that starts with the communities, the police, and your local elected prosecutors. And from that core, I believe, is where you really have the roots to take place for robust and meaningful criminal justice reform.
So I think it's fair to say that the case for a fair, more just, and equitable criminal justice system doesn't divide along partisan or ideological lines, but reflects our shared and common values as Americans who have our stake in our institutions and our systems. So will you all join me in thanking Arthur, and wait, and wishing him a happy birthday.